All right, today's lesson is going to be on midpoints. All right, so a midpoint is just a point on the line segment. That cuts it in half. We're going to cut it into two equal parts. So it either cuts it in half or cuts it into two equal parts. So if we know a point is a midpoint, we're going to use M for midpoint. Then we can say AM, the length of line segment AM, is equal to the length of line segment MB. There's some other formulas in there that we'll talk about when we get to bisectors in the next video, but for now, that's all we need to know. All right, so we're going to plot these points on here, okay, 3, -6, and 7, 2. When we do this, okay, the x of the midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and the y from the midpoint, that's a sub-midpoint here, is y1 plus y2 all over 2. So our midpoint is going to look like this. Okay, x1 plus x2 all over 2, comma, y1 plus y2 all over 2. I like to think of this as finding the average. Okay, if you had two test scores, you would add them together and then divide by 2. So that's all we're doing, is finding the average. So these points here, this is x1, y1, this is x2, y2. All right, and we're going to plug these in. So here, the x of my midpoint, this x from my midpoint, is going to be 3 plus 7 divided by 2. Okay, that is going to give me 10 divided by 2, which is 5. So the x of my midpoint is at 5, comma, same thing with my y's. -6 plus 2 over 2. That gives me -4 over 2, which is -2. All right, so my midpoint, you can graph it at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -2. It's on the line and it is in the middle. You guys can use distance formula to check that, but whatever. All right, so this can get a little bit more complicated. This is not too bad. Okay, but the x from my midpoint is -9 plus 8 divided by 2. This gives me -1/2. Okay, so my midpoint is -1/2, comma, and then we have the y value of my midpoint is 3 plus -7, or 3 minus 7 divided by 2. It gives me -4 over 2, which is -2. So here we have -2. So here we are at -1/2, -2. This is my midpoint, okay, of that line segment. It's just in the middle. It's at -1/2. It doesn't have to always be perfect. All right, now the hardest thing on here is when they give you one point and the midpoint. Okay, so here we have A is at 0, 1. The midpoint is at 3, 5. All right, so this is A. This is my midpoint. And then what we're looking for is, because that's my midpoint, we're looking for some point up here in this general direction. So that's our line. Our line segment is going to be shorter than that, but that's kind of the general area. It's going to be somewhere in that region, because it has to be on the other side of the midpoint. Okay? So here, we're going to use the same formula as we have been using, and then I'll show you a way to just count, and it's kind of easier. But here, the x of my midpoint is x1 plus x2 all over 2. Okay, in this case, we don't know x1 and x2. We only know x1 and x of my, we only know x1, y1, and x of my midpoint and y of my midpoint. So we don't know x1 and x2, but we do know x of m is 3. So the x from my midpoint is 3 equals 0 plus whatever x2 is divided by 2. So we're just going to solve this. We're going to multiply by 2 on both sides. 6 equals 0 plus x2, which this kind of cancels. So x2, the value of x2 is going to be at 6. And now we do the same thing for y. So for y sub n, the midpoint of my y, the y of my midpoint is equal to x1, or sorry, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And we are going to plug in, we're going to substitute everything we know. We know y1 is 1 plus y2 over 2, and y sub m, the y value of my midpoint is 5. So we multiply by 2 on both sides. We get 10 equals 1 plus y2 minus 1. 9 is the value of my second point. So this is going to be 9. So the point B is going to be at 6, comma 9. All right, and then we'll work on some of these in class. Let me show you the easier way to do these. Okay, the way I like to do this is if you can look at it, we're kind of going to use slope here. To find my midpoint, I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 3. So I went up 4 and over 3. It's going to be the same thing for the next point. We're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1, 2, 3. And this is my point at 6, comma 9 that we just found. Okay, you do need practice with writing the equations and substituting in, but that's a good way to check your work, is just do your rise and your run, and you guys should be fine.